Good day! Today we will consider one of the most complex models, processing station. This model consists of two controllers, master and slave. There is both pneumatic and electromechanical part. So let's look at in more detail. At the initial stage, the workpiece is placed here. There is a phototransistor here. Then this motor starts working. This model also has an alarm light. Then the compressor and the motor for moving the vacuum gripper are started. This model uses 4 pneumatic valves. 2 of them are responsible for gripping the workpiece, 1 for the furnace door and 1 for pushing. Next is a turntable with a pusher. Here is the turntable motor. Next is the milling motor. After pushing, the conveyor motor and phototransistor are activated. Practical part. This is what the main program looks like. As we can see, you need 10 subroutines. Let's look at the first subroutine. The first subroutine is called reference. In it, we see that the lamp for illuminating the phototransistor is turned on first. Then the compressor turns on. Please note that the compressor belongs to the slave controller EM1. After a short pause, the M2 motor of the EM1 controller is turned on, which is responsible for returning the vacuum gripper to its initial position. We see that the motor moves to the left. As soon as the limit switch I5 is closed, by the way, this switch is connected to the main controller, the motor M2 of the EM1 controller stops. Meanwhile, the M1 motor of the EM1 controller turns on, which also returns to its initial position. The motor moves until it presses the limit switch I2. After that, the motor stops. The next subroutine is burn. The entire technological process begins with this subroutine. We see the element of phototransistor I5 and compressor O8. After a pause, we wait for the workpiece to arrive at the starting point. As soon as the workpiece is at this point, after 1.5 seconds, the M1 motor of the EM1 controller starts moving until the limit switch I1 of the EM1 controller is pressed. After that, the motor stops. This means that the workpiece has entered the furnace. Now the heating process is simulated. Lamp O8 of the EM1 controller flashes 14 times, and after that the workpiece returns to the starting point. Motor M1 and limit switch I2 are responsible for this. This completes the subroutine. Next, we have the pick-up subroutine. This subroutine is responsible for gripping the workpiece with a vacuum gripper. First of all, the O6 valve is triggered, which is responsible for lowering the vacuum gripper. After that, the O5 valve is triggered and the workpiece is captured. Next, valve O6 is turned off and the workpiece rises. The next subroutine is VGR table. Everything is very simple here. This subroutine is responsible for moving the workpiece to the turntable. The motor M2 of the EM1 controller moves until it presses the limit switch I5. After pressing, the motor stops. The release subroutine is responsible for releasing the workpiece. Here, the processes are the opposite for the pickup subroutine. An output to the wait for element in the main program and turning off the compressor O8 is also added. The VGR oven subroutine is responsible for moving the workpiece to the oven. The motor M2 of the EM1 controller moves to the right until it presses the limit switch I3 of the EM1 controller. After that, the motor stops. Next comes the table VGR subroutine. It implements rotation of the turntable by motor M1 and limit switch I1. Next comes the table saw subroutine. In this program, the turntable rotates to the limit switch I2 and stops. After a pause, the M2 saw starts working for 5 seconds and stops. This completes the subroutine. The table belt subroutine rotates the turntable to the conveyor belt. Motor M1 moves to limit switch I3 and stops. The last subroutine, eject, is responsible for pushing the workpiece onto the conveyor belt and moving the workpiece to the end of the conveyor belt. Motor M3 of the conveyor is working. Compressor O8 is turned on. After a pause, valve O7 turns on and pushes the workpiece. Then the valve turns off. The compressor is also turned off. The M3 motor stops and the program ends. Now we can look at the operation of this program.